Today is Saturday. What's the date? August?
The 8th.
The 8th. This is Maurice Guibard of the Société Historique Francophone de la Colombie-Britannique. And I'm being welcomed at the home of Rusty Patenaude, and with his brother Roger Patenaude. Good day, gentlemen.
Good day.
And we're going to be here, we're near Williams Lake in Greater Williams Lake, halfway between Williams Lake and Horsefly, right?
Right.
And we're going to talk about the Patenaude family, which has been around a few decades in this area.
Yes.
Who wants to talk about the early days? Like, do you have a general idea about the original?
Well, JP come into the country.
That's Joseph Philippe. Yes.
Philip, yeah.
Yeah.
In, I think, you've probably done some of the research, 1880?
Yeah, around then, yeah. Do you recall where he came from?
Well, my understanding is Trois River, Quebec.
Trois-Rivières, yeah, Three Rivers, yeah. Yeah, around there.
There.
Okay.
That's my understanding. My wife's done a little bit of the history on it.
You bet.
And that's where part of the Patenaude family were.
And he married twice.
He married twice, right?
He married Catherine Anderson first.
Right.
And both of you are descendants of that union, correct?
Correct.
And then when she died, he married Maria Henrietta Bradshaw, and Spencer Hope Patenaude is their son.
Right.
So let's talk.
Well, actually, not Spencer, would be Hope. Well, was Hope Hope was the dad of Spencer. Was Hope's first name Spencer?
Correct.
So
yes.
they were both Spencers.
They were both Spencers.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Like we had a couple of JPs as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you know anything else about JP that, I've got some notes, but from your memories and what you've been talking about?
No, just from what I've seen in the museum at Horsefly, there's quite a bit of work done on that and what Allison's brought up in her work.
Well, he was a postmaster, a storekeeper in Horsefly as well, by the way, a rancher as well. And there was a play on words in that JP was Joseph Philippe, and also Justice of the Peace. He was also a judge. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Now, then we bring it closer to the generation that we're going back 2 generations now above you.
Right.
Your grandparents. Right?
Right.
Do you want to talk to me about that part of the family?
Well, I guess if I may, I remember Grandpa. We call him Grandpa Patenaude, which known as Bryson, was a pioneer in his own right as far as guiding the first hunters and stuff into the Black Water or Black Creek country, and I remember stories of him talking about building a cairn on a mountain and leaving a signature under a rock, and in that case I was always intrigued by climbing and stuff, so he told me to check it out, and sure enough we've climbed that mountain and found a signature of his under a rock in it, and that was very rewarding and really brought back the history of Grandpa in this part of the country.
And what happened to the signature?
We put it back under the rock and left it there, and to my knowledge I'm probably one of the few people that know that it's there, so I would not hesitate if I could get back there to probably find it again, and it's still there.
And did that mountain have a name?
Yeah, it was the Puffin Dutchman, it's called. Yeah.
It's got to be a story behind there.
Yeah, and I don't know that story, but...
Well, I do actually know that story. It was when he was guiding out there, he took a Dutchman up the mountain, and actually when they got up to the top of the mountain, the Dutchman was puffing pretty hard, so they called it the Puffin Dutchman. Is how that become that name.
I didn't know that.
I remember him telling the story.
Is that right? Yeah.
And the reason the cairns were there is my grandfather worked for a survey outfit. They come through and did the some surveying and used those mountains as.
Was this the Bryson who, with his wife, had an inn for the hunters as well?
Right, they ran the Bluebird Inn in
Horsefly.
Horsefly.
And what was its role?
Well, it was just a stopping center for, and a kind of a hotel. It wasn't a hotel, but I mean, it was a facility that had a number of beds, I'm assuming, and unfortunately it burnt down on them. They lost it to fire, and I don't know how many years they had it, Roger. Do you know?
Well, it burnt in when my dad moved to the 53 is what caused him to move to the 53 was that the Bluebird Inn burnt down, and I think it was in 30.
Yeah, 38 or 39, yeah.
Something
that's what
like
I
that.
think, yeah.
Okay.
Because my dad was 8 years old, so
Right.
he's born in 26, so it would have been 34, 35 that he come out to the 53. And my grandfather, Bryson, was already working at the store in the 53 for Lale Crisina.
Okay,
See,
so we've got.
my dad was living in Horsefly with his older brother, Teeter.
So who is your dad now? What's his
Elmer
name?
Joseph.
Albert Joseph.
Elmer Joseph, yeah.
Elmer Joseph.
Yeah.
All right. And he went to 153 Mile.
When he was 8 years old, yeah. Because the Bluebird Inn burnt down, that was their house, and he was living with Teeter, his brother, who was much older, about
13 years.
13 years older. So they were living in Horsefly, and Dad was going to school there. And Teeter was actually, at that time, buying furs from everybody. He was actually into furs and buying furs and
For the Hudson Bay Company.
yeah,
And Teeter is Bernard Bryson.
Bernard
Right.
Bryson.
Bryson.
Yeah.
And he is your uncle?
He's
Yes.
our uncle.
Right.
Right.
So, but before the 153 Mile Ranch, the Wood Jam Ranch was involved. Your family was involved in that
It was a next generation before.
before, right?
Before. It was between JP and Bryson, so it was in, that would be?
Albert.
Albert.
Albert Patenaude was and that would be a second or a third cousin, Roger.
Well, it'd be a great uncle, wouldn't it? Because that's Jeff's side of the family.
Yes, that's true. So it would be, I guess it would be a cousin or uncle,
A great uncle. wouldn't
great
it?
uncle, yeah.
And he came, Albert Joseph actually came from Ormston, Quebec. There were three of the brothers or one brother that was sent out by the dad to come explore out here. And basically, things went well. So several members of the family came out at that point. But the Wood Jam, did the Patenaude family ever own the Wood Jam Ranch?
Well, Jeff would be able to tell you more.
Okay,
of that.
all right.
Jeff will be able to tell you because that was his side of the family that had the
I
wood
see.
jam.
Okay, all right.
And he would be able to.
I think they owned it because I always had referred to me as the Patenaude Ranch on the Black Creek Valley, right?
Yeah.
There you go. They changed the name. You're right.
And they worked that whole valley because there is the old Patenaude place that's further up
Yeah.
than Wood Jam, where Patenaude Lake is and Patenaude Creek comes
And
down
it's
into
still there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any buildings left there. There was the last time, but that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a barn left there, but I don't think the house is there. But Jeff will tell you because Jeff knows. I mean, Jeff is old enough to.
And the heritage goes back to where they used to have music festivals every summer out there, and we'd all go out there and camp overnight. They'd have a big outdoor dance and stuff, and they'd have entertainment. And I don't know, we went out there for a number of years, Roger?
Yeah, that was actually the Gunderson family that put that on after they moved
But it
into
was
the valley.
at the Patenaude Ranch, though, right?
No, it was up at the furthest one, at the
Oh,
Gunderson,
okay.
at the barns at Gunderson's is where.
So it was
So the
past-
Patenaude place is back from there.
Okay.
See,
okay.
the Gunderson place is up where, what's the creek that Grandpa mined on, that we have the
Oh,
gold nuggets for, Club Creek.
Club Creek.
Club Creek, and it's right there, it comes in at the top of Black Creek.
So you still have gold nuggets
We
from
actually
your
have all of our-
grandfather's.
All the grandgirls have nuggets that are that are in jewelry, and actually, I think our boy has a nugget, and we still have some nuggets that we have in stuff that come from Club Creek. I could show you some.
That's in the safe
Yeah.
at the store, no?
Yeah, well,
The
it was
general
in the store, it's in my house
It's
now.
in your house
in
now.
the safe.
I'd love to see those.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And each of the girls, Alison will show you her necklace with a nugget on it.
Lovely.
That our grandfather mined out of Club Creek.
Very nice. Was Patenaude Creek ever a gold bearer?
Not that I know of.
No? Okay.
But I'm at, I couldn't tell you for sure.
Sure. All right, let's get back to your generation then, and that would have been Ernest Joseph or James. I've seen both names, Ernest James Joseph.
Yeah, I don't know. I know him as Ernest.
Ernest, there you go.
And I'm not sure what his. I think it was Joseph.
Okay, and so tell me, do you remember Ernest?
Never.
No, that's before your time.
Before our time.
Before your time. So you remember his son, who was your grandfather, George Bryson.
Oh, George Bryson.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, at that point, did anybody ever remember French being spoken in the family?
No.
No. Was there ever any talk that there was ever French spoken in the family?
No, the only thing I remember Grandpa saying, Bryson, is that he was a Frenchman from France, but that wasn't true. He was a Frenchman from Quebec. Now, why he would say that, I don't know. So what history was there that would make, but I remember him saying that they were Frenchmen from France and not from Quebec. So I have no idea why that, and Alison, through her research, I mean, they were at least 3 generations in Quebec before they moved here.
Right.
So I have no
Pretty
reason.
much makes him from Quebec, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Canadian.
Yeah.
That said, I seem to recall that there were numerous trips back to Lachute, Quebec, for education purposes.
They traveled back lots of times. Even Bryson went back and got educated in Quebec.
So they must have had some knowledge of French at that point.
I would think so, but
Yeah, because
We-
Ormston is in the English part, is in the Eastern Townships, I think, but Lachute is definitely in the Francophone area.
yeah.
So-
Well, I never heard.
But you
any
never heard
French,
it.
no,
All right.
And
Now, if we go all the way back to Joseph Philip, his 2 wives seem to, was there native blood? Were they First Nations or were they European? Do you know?
I don't know that. Alison might know that
Okay.
through her research. So
All right.
The one died, right? And that's
Yes,
why
the
he
first
had
one,
second
yeah,
wife.
1881.
Yeah.
And okay, and she was also from Ormston, actually. Okay, so let's bring it back to Bryson, who married Rena Chandler, Rena Fielding Forsyth Chandler, quite the name. And then they had, as far as I could tell, a couple of children.
They actually had 3 children.
3 children.
Three
There's-
children. One died. I don't know when he died. He's buried in Horsefly
Yeah.
Okay.
in the cemetery at Horsefly. But they had 3 children.
So that's Elmer,
Which was the youngest.
right, and then Bernard, who's Teeter.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did Teeter come from? What's the Teeter?
Teeter was was it a nickname? I don't know where it come from. We always called him Uncle Teeter.
Uncle
Yeah.
Teeter.
Yeah.
And we always used to, Mom and Dad would let us go down to their place and go to the big fair in Vancouver.
the Peony.
Oh, wow.
We used to always
Yeah.
go there.
Because they had 2 daughters, Phyllis
Yeah.
and what's the other one?
Dorothy, yeah.
So they were a little bit older than Rusty. So we'd go down there and they'd take us to the first
take
place
us
I had pizza was at the Peony. Never knew pizza existed until we went to Vancouver. And I probably was only
Yeah.
like 6 years old. And
What a
had a
treat.
piece of pizza. I didn't know what this was.
Did any of the family get involved in rodeo competitions?
No, we
No.
never did. My dad wasn't a horse person. We did everything on foot or quads, bikes or whatever and stuff like that. But As we grew, as I remember, I kind of started into the horse end of it a little bit because, well, I wanted that, and Dad allowed that, and I actually was the first one to really start chasing cattle with horses and stuff, and
Because you're much older than Roger, aren't you? What's the age difference between
we're
the
4 years.
4 years?
5 years.
5 years?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so, no, I might be older, but not as smart.
Well, let's start with the senior. All right, the senior brother. So you started in you did some cattle work.
I always like to think that I was the one that was left on the ranch with Dad to work the ranch, and I think through growing and expanding, both Larry and Roger were kind of almost pushed in another direction just because we weren't big enough on the ranch to afford to be able to have all four of us there. And in hindsight, it was just another way of really growing into what we created. Is the Roger and Larry went into logging and road construction and just stuff like that, and built a real good found companies doing that, and that really helped us grow. In retrospect, it was a big part of the ranch getting bigger, for sure. Yeah.
But at one point, you moved away from ranching.
Well, as kids, you're growing up, and my parents were always willing to let all of us go and see what was on the other side of the fence. And my passion happened to be in hockey, and they allowed me to go away. I remember the first time we went to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan to try out for a team, and the idea was, I'd probably come back. If I did well, I'd go to Kelowna, and they had a working agreement there. So I remember them calling me into the office in Moose Jaw, and they said, we're really happy with what we see in you, and we're thinking of maybe keeping you here in Moose Jaw. So of course I was really excited, and but I was smart enough to say, well, you better phone my parents and talk to them, and they did. And then my parents got a hold of me and asked me what, of course I jumped at the idea. I mean, I was on cloud nine thinking I was really something, but anyway, they were allowed me to grow in my own way, and they did that with Roger and Larry too. Like they basically let them go out and do their own thing, and I think that was a big part of how strong we came, because all three of us kind of had that strength in family, and how we were smart enough to figure out how working together created strength and the ability to grow, and in my opinion, that was a big part of it, them letting us kind of do our thing. And as it worked out, we all come back to the ranch and grew it into what it is today.
All right, I'm going to pause 2 seconds. So Moose Jaw, how long were you there?
I was there 2 years, and it was the beginning of my process of getting to become a pro. Like the first year I come home at Christmas time, and I wasn't playing, and I was kind of down. This going to Moose Jaw was so exciting, and of course I hardly played the first year. and for some reason I knew when I come home, if I didn't go back, I would never really be okay with myself, and so I sucked it up and went back, and by gosh, that last half of the season I started to play, and then it just took off. The next year I played with a guy by the name of Reg Bechtold, and we were the big line, and we got lots of ice time and did well, and it just grew from there. And I always remember I made the right decision in going back. That's I didn't give up, and that was a big part of me becoming a pro. Yeah.
So how long between Moose Jaw and becoming a pro? How long was that
Then
process?
from Moose Jaw, I went to actually the league. Kind of did a transaction, and I went to Calgary as a junior, and I played in Calgary 1 year, and then I got drafted by the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I went to their camp that year, and I didn't, in those days there wasn't near as many teams, of course, so, there was only 12 teams then, so it was pretty tough to get a job unless you were outstanding, and I never was an outstanding ability. I made it on hard and hard work, and at the end of camp, they actually called me in and said, we're happy with what we see, but we can either send you to the American League in Baltimore, or else you can go back and play another year of overage in Calgary. So, and I'm not sure why I decided to come back to Calgary, but I knew if I did come back to Calgary, I would play lots. And I think that was, I really don't have a reason why I decided to go back to Calgary, because I had the option to play semi-pro. Anyway, I ended up in Calgary and had a big year. Was again one of the mainstays on the club. And then World Hockey came along, and I got drafted again by Edmonton. And the guy that was in Edmonton was Bill Hunter, and I played against them in junior for the 4 years. So he knew what my ability was, and he come out and talked me into signing with them, and that's how my pro career really started.
And this was the Edmonton Oilers.
Yes, yeah.
And how long? Sorry.
Yeah, so I was in Edmonton for basically 6 years, and then the league had trouble in Indianapolis, and the owner of Edmonton was Scalvania, and he was talked into going to Indianapolis to help out there, and that's when Peter Pocklington come in and took over Edmonton. So Scalvania decided that he would do that, but he wanted to take 2 players with him to Indianapolis to help the team. So they agreed, and one of the players was Rusty Patenaude, and the other was Barry Wilkins, a defenseman. So I ended up in Indianapolis. I was a little disheartened because I was treated very well in Edmonton, and I was one of the kingpins in Edmonton. I got to play lots and had made the All-Star team, Rookie of the Year 1 year and stuff. So I was a little disheartened when I got traded, but that happens in pro hockey, and you just have to kind of live with that. So I went to Indianapolis, and they didn't have a great team, but I had a tremendous year. I scored 22 goals before Christmas time and won, and made the All-Star team and stuff, and then pulled a hamstring in the last half of the season and tried to come back, just never got healed up, tried to come back too early, and ended up the season kind of hurt, but that was kind of the deciding factor that we had 2 kids, and I'd promised my wife that when it come time for the kids to go to school, we would go home, and in the meantime we had built a home on the ranch, and that's how it ended, sort of thing. I was offered a chance to go back and play in Edmonton. Sather, I stood up for the trainer in Edmonton. I became good friends with him, and he got married in Banff, and I was at one of his best men. And at the time, Sather and McGregor were there, and they said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "We're going to retire." And I remember Sather saying to me, "Yeah, you don't want to retire yet. Come to camp, and I'll give you a 2-year contract." And I said, "Well, I want to go home and think about it." And so I did, and then I thought, I always loved ranching. I loved the family and that part, and I didn't want to end up in the minors. I was smart enough to know, my time was limited, and I wasn't a huge talent. I mean, it's very competitive to stay on top, very competitive, and you have to have your marbles all together, and that's just the way the pro game is. And so I decided to come home, and I really never regretted. The only regret I would have, if I was asked, the Gretzky come into the play the year after, and I probably would have been the guy to play on right wing with him, because the guy that did was Blair McDonald, and he scored 50 goals with Gretzky, and he was kind of the 4th winger when I was in Edmonton. So but I don't regret it one bit. I enjoyed what I did. I felt I was part of growing what we ended up with here as a family, and I was just part of it. So.
Well, congratulations on that career.
Thank you.
And thanks for being there for us.
Okay.
Now, so you did get married and have a family during that period as well.
Yes, I did. Yeah, 2 girls, and that would be the other regret I have, that they were too young to really remember Dad as a pro. But that's the way it is, in the time element and stuff.
And what are those family members' names?
My oldest daughter is Tanya, and the youngest is Sarah, and they're both married and have their own career. And the oldest has her husband has a construction business, do very well. And my Sarah is in dairy farming in Crescent, doing very well in a family operation. So they've done very well, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So where was Roger at when the brother came back?
Roger was doing his thing in the logging business. He was had his own show. We had a contract with Jacobson Brothers in Williams Lake, which owned a mill there, and Roger was running the logging end of things and doing very well. Like, it was not a big logger, but a very good young small-time operator, and did very well in the logging business.
So Roger, what brought you back into ranching then?
Well, actually, I started out, at that time I was working in town for a sign shop. I was actually working for a sign shop, and Larry phoned me
Larry's your brother.
Larry's my brother, who was working on the ranch while Rusty was playing hockey, and Larry said, "We're haying, you got to come out and help us." And so I come out and helped him. I never went back to town, so that's how I ended up back on the ranch.
And just to refresh our memory, which ranch are we talking about? Is this the Patenaude ranch?
This is the ranch at the 53, at the 153.
Where you are now?
Yeah.
The 153 mile ranch.
Yeah.
All right.
And that would have been in about 73. We had Rusty'd come back with some money and we started expanding the ranch
Yeah.
in '72. We bought part of the 50 ranch. So we were expanding, and Rusty was still playing hockey, and Larry and Dad were trying to run the ranch, and it was starting to get to be a bit of a handful. So then I come back, and then we continued on that avenue of expanding the ranch and making it bigger. So
Good stuff. And you never looked back.
Yeah.
Was there a time when you were ranching together?
oh yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah,
all
Roger,
ranched together.
yeah.
All
Yeah.
like my Rusty played hockey, but he'd come back for the summers, and Larry was on the ranch full time.
Yeah.
And then I come back, and then Larry started. We found some gravel near the ranch, so we got a gravel permit, and Larry started the construction part of it. And of course, we had pine beetle come through the ranch, so we had quite a bit of timber on the ranch, and we needed to log it. So that's how I started into the logging part of it. So it kind of just worked itself out, and
Yeah, it just kind of the way it
Yeah.
turned out.
yeah.
And is Larry still with us?
No, Larry passed away in. Mom passed away in '99. Larry passed away in
202.
202 with
202.
he got lung cancer, big cell
Yeah.
lung cancer, and no idea why he got it. He wasn't a smoker or anything, so just one of those things.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I'm just going through the list of siblings. So Rusty's the oldest, and that's Edgar Arnold, is it not?
Yes, yes.
And then Larry, and then Roger,
Yeah.
and then is it Dennis?
Yes. And Dennis was the youngest, and he ended up in a tractor accident on the farm and got killed. And that was a huge blow to my dad.
How old was Dennis then?
Dennis would have been probably 8, I think, was he?
He's 7, I think.
7?
Wasn't he? Yeah, he was.
7.
That would have been in '62. I think the store closed in '63.
3, yeah.
'62, I was in the hospital for
Yeah.
the summer, so it was. No, it was. It would have been '61 that he was killed, I think, because I wasn't in the hospital when he got killed.
No. Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
one other brother that was born that was a crib death, and
That's
that was
Wayne.
Wayne between Rusty and Larry. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
so there was 5 boys. My mother always wanted a girl, but never got a girl.
Yeah.
So,
So memories about the ranch.
oh, fond memories. I mean, I don't remember as much. Rusty remembers putting hay up with a team of
Yeah.
horses.
Yes, I do.
I wasn't old enough to remember. They were putting hay up when I was born, but I don't remember horses. But Rusty remembers actually putting hay up with horses, and then I remember from horses to square bales, and us putting square bales up, and we had cousins that come up, and
Yeah.
one year Rusty took on a contract to put the 2 other ranches' bales up one summer. And we put up 70,000 square bales, hand stacked 70,000 square bales one summer.
Amazing all on its
yeah,
own.
yeah.
Now, what's this about 2 other ranches?
Okay.
Well, that we contracted. We contracted
I see.
for the 50 ranch, the 150 ranch, and for the YS ranch, which would
Okay.
be the brushes. But we eventually bought part of those ranches
Yeah.
later on, and
We ended
as
up
we
owning
expanded
most of
them.
them,
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah.
Now, on your ranch, there's a general store. Tell me about that.
Well, the general store is what actually brought us to
Yeah.
the 53, because my grandpa Bryson Patenaude went to work for the woman that had the store, which was the Crisina family, Leo Crisina.
Lillian
Actually,
Christina, yeah.
and actually who started was Louis Crisina, come into the country in the late 1800s from Italy as a 14-year-old boy that left Italy when he was 14 years old, ended up here.
And what was his name? I'm sorry?
Louis
Louis Cristina.
James Crisina.
Okay.
And he would become he became a blacksmith and started a stopping house on the way to the gold field in his day, and that's how actually the 53 got started. It was more or less a stopping spot on its way to the gold fields. And in those days they'd have teams that would be pulling wagons and stuff, whether it was supplies or whatever, and where the 53 is, it's kind of an uphill struggle to there, and they'd always have to unhook and go back and pick up another there and bring them up and double hitch in the way they would go, and lots of times they'd overnight there, and then he made a living by blacksmithing the horses that needed reshod or whatever, you know, so that's how it kind of started, wasn't it, Roger?
Yeah, and then they had people stop by and they would trade stuff for work done on the place, and then that's how they ended up getting into the store, and it was a stopping house, and then the store evolved, and it was actually quite a big trading area. It was if you look back in the books, it's amazing how much money went through that store for those years, and they did a big business, so.
So how long did it run?
Well, they started it in 1900. There's ledgers that started in 1900, and they closed the doors in 1963 when Lil Christina died of a heart attack behind the counter.
And it's a huge store.
It's
very large.
It's a very large store, and it sold everything there, and it did a big business there. Williams Lake didn't exist when it first started, right? And even in '63, it was doing a bigger business than Mackenzie's store in Williams Lake was doing at that time.
Yeah. I was in the store the day that Mrs. Christina had her massive heart attack, and I would be busy filling orders, and then we would put them in boxes and put them outside the store on the porch, and we had a stagecoach that ran into Horsefly and areas twice a week. They'd be, I think, Tuesday and Thursdays, if I remember right, and they'd phone in and have orders, so we'd have to have them ready and put on the porch, and the stagecoach would stop and take them on in, and you know, we were a big part of supplying the food and stuff for that whole Black Creek area and Horsefly and stuff. In those days, there was some small mills that were out in that country. One particular one, the Gardeners, and they employed quite a bunch of men and stuff. So we were a big part of supplying the stuff for those places.
So the Lillian Christina, she was single, right? She never married.
Yeah.
And was she like a member of your family, like,
Well,
or?
we called her Aunt Lil, and actually, I consider her my second mom because Mom had Dennis only 13 months after I was born, and my mother had a lot of work to do, and so actually Lil took me under her wing, and I stayed over at Lil's house and lots, and she kind of took me under her wing, and yeah.
And was her house in the store or beside the store?
Beside the store. Well, they lived in the log house that we eventually moved into and grew up into. Mm-hmm. But they lived there, and then they built a new house in 40...
No, it was in the
50s. Yeah, 57. Was it the same year Grandpa got the new car?
I think so.
Yeah, so they built a new house, and then we moved into the log house there.
And the story I heard is that Lil would not move into the new house until Dad and Mom agreed to move into her old house. We lived in a little bunkhouse kind of behind the big log house at the time, and I'm not sure if that story's true, Roger, but I did hear that, and I think that was from Mom, that they had to agree to move into the big house, so before Lil would move into the new house.
Well, there was no running water at that time, and I remember sleeping on top of the bathtub. There was a box made that fit on top of the bathtub, and that's where I slept. And so it's pretty neat stories. And then it must have been quite a treat for Mom to move into the big log house because
room
and running water and
So where is Lillian Christina buried?
She's buried in town, in the cemetery in
At
town.
Horsefly?
No,
or Williams Lake?
Williams Lake. She's born in the Christina. There's a Christina plot in Williams Lake that has
Her dad.
dad to be, and the mom.
Yeah,
in
and doesn't it have one of the brothers too, Roger, or
And
not?
I can't remember. I remember going in and redoing the burial site there because it was in a cement, and we tore the cement out because the city of Williams Lake wanted it
Nicer
gone.
headstones, yeah.
So we tore that out, and just the headstones are there.
So there's a general store on your lot full of merchandise.
Well, my mother made it into a
Instrumental.
museum.
Right.
She went through it after it closed in '63, and I don't know when she started. Probably in the '90s, she started and pulled a bunch of the artifacts out of the upstairs and started making it a museum. And it's quite a museum. It's got about 85. They figure 8,500 artifacts in it, right from. It's a time capsule, right from 1900 to 1963 when it closed. So.
Something that my mother wanted, and on her deathbed actually asked Roger and I to make sure the store is looked after and don't let it go astray. And so Roger and Allison have been very instrumental in trying to figure out how we can have this, like Roger says, time capsule kind of looked after, and trying to live up to my mother's wishes, sort of thing. And that's where the story goes now. We're dealing with the city of Williams Lake, trying to make sure we could get it maybe moved into a heritage spot in Williams Lake, with the city of Williams Lake agreeing to make sure it is looked after for foreseeable future, sort of thing. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
Okay.
Just
That's
to kind of
exciting.
protect it, yeah.
It'll be a big job,
Well, it's
but
a big job.
it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
Now, Roger's a pilot. So why and how did this come about that you've got your pilot's license?
Well, I think actually it come back by my dad. I remember when we used to go somewhere, he'd always stop at the airport and watch airplanes. Like, they intrigued him something, so I must have got it from my dad. But when I got married, and I wanted to get my pilot's license, so I got my pilot's license and got my first airplane. And
What kind of plane do you have now?
well, I actually have 3 planes.
Oh, okay. Tell us about them.
Well, I started out. I had a guy that mentored me over at the air park at Springhouse, and he found my first airplane was a PA-12, a Piper PA-12, which was very easy to fly, very forgiving airplane. So that's what I got into. And then floats intrigued me, so I decided to get a float plane. So we got a PA-12 on floats. And then, of course, warbirds intrigued me, but we didn't have a lot of money to get into warbirds, so I got into a steerman, which they call a poor man's warbird. So I found a steerman in Wichita, Kansas, in parts. So I went down, took an engineer, and we went down and looked at what we had. And the guy down there mentored me, and we built this airplane, put it all back together, and flew it. And then my third airplane's a Stagger Wing, which is another military airplane. So.
And are they kept at the Williams Lake Airport?
The one is at Williams Lake Airport right now in the hangar, and the other 2 are on the ranch still.
On the ranch. You can land on the ranch?
I have an airstrip at the ranch. And
The Patenaude Airport. Yeah. Wonderful. Now, talking about potentially retirement, right? Rusty, you're sort of retired now.
Yes,
Right?
and I guess, retirement is in the eyes of the beholder. There's different ways of retiring. My thought of retiring is being able to sit back and enjoy something that you've built or mentored, but being able to do it in a relaxed and non-pressured time. I am very at peace when I'm on my place and not. I can see where I can really enjoy something and knowing that I don't have to make a big time living off of it, but it's got the quietness, the peace of the birds singing and stuff. It's just a very tranquil type of setting, and that's my idea of retirement. Some people's is traveling and stuff, and each to their own sort of thing. So I think my retirement is a little different than some. Yeah, I'm a man of the land or whatever, and just feel very comfortable in it.
And you've got your own, this, do you call this a ranch here?
Yes.
You're on your own ranch?
Yeah.
Well, how, you acquired this not too long ago?
Well, I sold the ranch that was part of the 53 about 6-7 years ago, and I lived with a lady that was working on this ranch and has a big passion for horses and breeding horses, and we just decided that, you know, we don't want to move from the area, and we need someplace for the horses, and if we're going to have horses, we might have a few cattle, and try and do it in a manner that isn't so demanding, and you know, enjoy it, and that's kind of what we're trying to create. So
And what is this lady's name?
Simone Fowler is her name.
Simone
and,
Fowler.
She's she loves her horses, and part of she's more engaged in just being on the land and enjoying it too. So yeah.
Excellent, excellent. And what about Roger? What are retirement plans for you?
Well, we're still ranching. We've had the ranch for sale for 3 years, and we bought the old home place back from my sister-in-law, which has the store and the old house on it. So my retirement plans is, I love the land, so there's 450 acres there. I can play on that land. And I also we have now control of the store, and hopefully we'll rebuild the old ranch house and make sure that it's preserved. So that's my goals, and maybe get some time to fly my airplanes and I've played around with motorbikes, racing motorbikes and stuff, so get some time to do that still.
Roger's wife's very instrumental in keeping the heritage of the ranch and the Patenaude family. She's very instrumental in being a part of that, and I really envy her passion towards that, and we're lucky to have her involved that way. I really feel that it's a huge asset to both of Roger and I. Don't you feel that way?
Oh yeah,
Roger?
it's amazing what she's done in that store.
Exactly.
She's went through that store and organized stuff, and she seems to enjoy it. So you know.
This is Allison,
Allison,
your wife.
yeah.
Tell us about your wife. How did you two meet?
She come into the Williams Lake with another girl that I'd went to school with. They took nursing in Kamloops and got their nursing degree, and Williams Lake had jobs open for nurses at that time. So Allison come up here nursing, and that's how I met her.
What's her maiden name?
Her maiden name is Anderson, and she originally come out of Jasper. Her dad had worked on the railroad and then had a garage in Jasper, so her whole family was involved in the railroad. So she's got some history there.
So when did the official hitching take place?
Well, we got married in '77, but yeah, it was.
You were together for 3-4 years.
3-4 years before that.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of fun. I mean, she was a nurse staying in the nurses' residence in Williams Lake, and I was partying one time with the girl that I went to school with. We were down at Cabaret, and I thought Allison was supposed to meet us down there, and she didn't show up. So Ruth gave me the keys to the nurses' residence, and so I went up to the nurses' residence, and pretty soon I knew that the cops were chasing me because I'd knocked too loud on the wrong door. So it was kind of fun. those stories are fun.
Very good. And you have children.
I have two children.
You
I
have two children.
A girl and a boy. The girl is a nurse practitioner, and she has two children.
What's
two
her name?
girls. Colleen.
Colleen.
And I have a boy, Bryson, who's a mechanical engineer, and he lives in. Colleen lives in Williams Lake, and Bryson lives in Kamloops, and he's actually working right now in Saskatchewan in the potash.
Okay.
They're doing a project in the potash mines, and he's got one girl. So we have no boys yet to take this family name on, so we're hoping Bryson's the last chance. They better have another one so we get a boy to keep the Patenaude name going.
Our society will insist on that. So, but are any of the children taken up ranching?
No, that's the very sad part about it. We had 6 children, and they all had the ranch was theirs if they'd showed some. Rusty Sarah had showed the most interest, but she married a dairy farmer and went that way, but none of them have taken an interest in it, and it's kind of a sad situation because you know, you like to pass your stuff on, and any one of them it showed an interest would have had the ranch. We would have made it work. We had lots of assets to make it work for them. So.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything about your respective families that we haven't spoken of that I haven't brought up?
Well, I guess the work ethic. I've never seen work ethic like my dad had, which must have been handed down from generations. But that's what I would say is the most interesting thing about our side of the family is the work ethic. You look at all our offsprings, and the work ethic they have is incredible. I mean, any one of the families that they have a work ethic is something that was instilled into us. And
you know, I always remember my parents talking about being grounded, and I use that word lots now. And it seems like the environment that Roger and I and Larry grew up was so conducive to being grounded, and by that I mean respecting your elders, respecting all the things that are common sense, that are part of being a good citizen, and you know, and hard work is a big part of that in that respect. And I think that over the years you can't find a better environment to bring that out in people, because you know, you don't have a store right next, walking down the street to get something, so you improvise, and you're happy with that. You get along, you learn to live with what is around you, and that's being grounded in lots of ways. I think that is very strong. It's very strong in my mind, being grounded, and I think Roger is kind of getting towards that with our offspring. Every one of them has a good work ethic and do the right things. Priorities are put in the right perspective, you know. Yeah.
I think that goes back to the fathers, the grandfathers, and grandmothers and mothers as well.
Well, our dear old dad, even when he had Alzheimer's, he wanted to.
Yeah. He wanted to be part of it.
He wanted to work. He wanted to come out and, you know, I'll work for you all day if you just feed me today, you know. And so it was instilled in him, and it's incredible, yeah. And I think part of that is probably going through. I mean, he went through the dirty 30s, and you know. Yeah. I mean, God, you look at the ranch, and we never threw a tire out because, you know, in the dirty 30s, you took a tire and booted it 4 or 5 times to try to keep it air in it, you know. So it was that really instilled things in people through the dirty 30s and the tough times.
There's one question I forgot to ask, and it's how big did your ranches get?
Well, the ranch at the height that we had 7,000 acres, and we were running over 1,000 head of cows.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not by far a huge ranch, but it was a good sized ranch, and in today's world, there's a lot of bigger ranches, but they're mainly owned by corporations and stuff. 1,000 head ranch now owned by a family is pretty instrumental in the ranch world. It's a mainstay for sure.
And we don't have the big open grasslands like you do on the river
Yeah.
or in the Kamloops area. So,
Yeah.
to run 1,000 head in this country
Yeah.
takes quite a bit of effort. So
Yeah, you have to move cattle around farther, and it
Your-
just is more work.
your winter feeding
longer.
period is longer, so you
Yeah.
need more feed. So,
Were there any bad years with the ranch?
oh, we went through some tough years.
Oh, yeah.
Like BSE hit us, and we went through some really tough years with BSE.
BSC is
Is
It's
bovine
brain disease
It's a
that-
brain
Oh.
disease that we got caught with, and
yeah,
of course then the U.S. Wouldn't let Canadian beef into the U.S. and we went through that for about 3 years. Very political but we had cattle. We were producing cattle cheaper than our cost. Like
Yeah.
we would have been better off to sell our herd
that's
for
if
3
we-
years and
yeah.
then buy it back in 3 years. Try to buy it back, but we went through those tough years and.
Yeah, I think if there was a major mistake that we made, that would be it. We thought we didn't owe any money. We'll sit this out. We thought, and we had no idea how long it would last, and we would have been way better, like Roger said, selling whatever and taking whatever we could get and sitting it out, and it would have been easier to ride it out that way. We wrote it out and we're fine, but it still was a mistake that we made. But we made it collectively. I think
It's really hard to give up that breeding,
yeah,
that gene pool that you've created, and to get it back,
yeah.
it's hard to do. So that's why that decision was made.
And the pine beetle would have affected your logging activities.
We had the pine beetle come through here. We had pine beetle and fir beetle come through, but the pine beetle come through and affected a lot of the ranch. So that's when we started the logging.
And
And at that time, Jacobson brothers were very good to ranchers at that
Yeah.
time. They had lots of timber, but they went out and bought the ranches timber. A lot of ranches survived because
yeah,
Harold Jacobson thought a lot of community, and that's what he did. Is he went and bought timber from ranches and
yeah.
supported ranches, and that's how we got through. So
And as bad as the pine beetle was to the whole economy of BC, in cases like ours, we were able to take that money where we would have been sitting on that timber and just kind of saving it for a rainy day or for retirement purpose or whatever. It gave us money, and of course, with our mindset, what are we going to do with a bit of money? Well, we grow, right? So you buy this or you buy that, and that was a part of how we grew, eh, Roger?
yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
put us into that, forced us to do that. So
yeah. So.
which wasn't bad.
No, it wasn't a bad thing, and we all enjoyed it. I mean, I can say that one thing about us, we could sit back after a day and look at what we did and feel good about it. Feel, boy, that was, it feels good. You worked hard, but you feel good about it. That's the feeling I think we all kind of had after a day's work on the ranch. It's a pretty satisfying feeling.
Actually, nothing more pleasing than look out. I mean, now we put round bales up, so it's not as much work, but looking out at a field that has round bales. But I remember back when we stacked square bales,
Yeah.
and to look at a stack of hay after you'd stacked it was pretty satisfying. It was pretty
When we were
self-serving
doing
and
that,
satisfying to see a big stack of hay out there and the work that you put into doing
Roger
it.
and I, he talked about stacking bales. We'd get up at 3 in the morning, go and stack bales crazy till 10:30, have 2,000 stacked by then. And then Roger and I go back and home and either cut or rake or do something for Dad. You know, that's just the way it was. You know, that's just how we did it. It was, yeah. I think it was all part and part of being grounded again, hey, just being part of growing, yeah.
What's the challenge, if any, to the ranching industry today?
Political.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very political. I mean, you see our local, well, the Canadian CBC running. I mean, they had a story out that the best way to save environment was to quit eating meat. Well, that's not science. So political is the big thing. They've got a lot of the animal activists that don't think we should be eating meat, and that's huge for us. Yet it's the most efficient protein that's existed if it's put up in a sustainable way, and there's nothing better than the way we put beef up. It's actually, they've proved that we're carbon sequestrians, that we actually bring carbon in by producing cattle, but that science hasn't got out to the urban people. But that's our biggest, I think, problem, is to get people to accept cattle, to stop these false accusations from getting out to the urban people, because the urban people do not know where their food comes from. They need to know where their food comes from. They think it comes out of the grocery store. It doesn't come out of the grocery store. It comes out of this ground, and people need to start to get, as Rusty said, grounded. They're not grounded in the city. They don't know where their stuff comes from. So I think that's the biggest issue with ranching right now is, and I think that we're starting to gain some. We've got the science behind us, is to get the word out, and especially in our, I mean, this methane thing is false as far as growing cattle in this way.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for sharing your family histories, your philosophies, your experiences, and I wish you both sustainable retirement.
Our pleasure, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for taking this on. It's
Thank you.
interesting
We're building
to see where your roots come from, and how we've evolved from generations back.
Absolutely. You have amazing stories, and you've both contributed in your own way to the development of the province, and that's what we're here to hail.
Ah, well, thank you.
Thank you to the Patenaudes. We're done.
Good.
All right. Now,